Hi everyone, welcome to Jane's Corner. Thank you so much for being here. Before I get into this video, I just want to say I'm so sorry. I was unable to upload a video last week and yeah, the lockdown got lifted, so I'm still trying to figure out how to juggle this channel and going back to work, but I promise I'm gonna get that balanced as soon as I can. Yeah, so today I'm going to be talking about the culture of comparison, specifically with social media and societal pressures. I think this is something we can all relate to. I've struggled with it, and I know so many people dear to me have struggled with it as well. Yeah, I think in one way or another, we've all been compared to or compared ourselves to either our friends, our family, our colleagues, our peers. And like I said, thanks to social media, now we are comparing ourselves to strangers as well. It's such a sad thing. I can actually remember where this culture of comparison began for me. In my first primary school, it's such an early age, but I remember we had a number system at that school, so they would list down the top performing students, and if I didn't make that list, I would be down and I would be so sad, and I would think I wasn't good enough and I wasn't as good as the other students who made the list. And if I did make the list, I would then think of myself as good enough. And if you think about it subconsciously, that becomes a way that we are developing in our minds without even knowing. Or I think we can all remember, even being children, how adults would compare us to each other. How adults would say, why don't you behave like your friend, or look at your brother or your sister, they are always passing and you don't do this, and they do this. And without knowing, we start to develop that culture because we start to measure or compare our achievement to others. If I'm not doing that, does that mean I'm not good enough? If I'm not being as good as that child or passing as good as my cousin or whoever, does that mean that I'm not smart enough? Those types of things start to develop in our minds without even realizing it. I think that there's such a thing as healthy competition, but to an extent, right? If we can use these types of things to motivate us and inspire us in a way that's not too aggressive, or where we are trying to become better than, but just in a way to motivate us, I think it's okay. But the problem is, when we dwell in this culture of comparison, we look at other people and we start to think that we are less than, and we start to look at our lives as unfulfilled and that we are lacking. And it's such a sad thing. We start to feel inadequate in so many areas just because other people are doing what we are not doing. It leads to peer pressure. And when we think of peer pressure, we think of children or teenagers. But I think it's just of a big issue with adults. How many of us actually struggle with wanting to be perceived in a certain light in society? We want to be looked at as successful, we want to be looked at as beautiful, we want to be looked at as all these other things, and it's such a sad thing. If you watched my video on shame, my last video, I spoke about the shame one carries as a result of a lack of accomplishment. And what that does is, when we think of ourselves, that I should have had this, I should have bought a house by now, I should have bought this type of car by now, or I should have been married or done A, B, C, and D, my business should have been here by now. And then we start to think that if we don't accomplish that, especially compared to other people, then we start to carry that shame, and we think that that makes us less than other people. But we forget that there's a backstory to everything, right? There's really a backstory to everything. We only see a glimpse of people's lives, a glimpse, whether it's your colleague, you only see them during the workday, or you only see people on social media, or you only see a little bit of their life, forgetting that there's a backstory to everything. So I want to touch on a few things that I've felt that I've compared myself to people, or I've had discussions with people in these contexts. And I'm going to start with relationship goals. Relationship goals is such a big thing. We look at people posting their vacations, people posting their Valentine's Day presents, and people doing all these types of things, and then we start looking at our relationships and we're like, okay, maybe my relationship is not so good after all. But I mean, perhaps you are just in a good relationship, the person is supportive, loving, and all these types of things, but now all of a sudden, because we are comparing, we start asking our partner, why don't you also take me on vacations? Why don't you also send me flowers? But you don't know, maybe those people were sent flowers because it's a form of an apology. You don't know the backstory. Or maybe those people saved a really long time to get to those vacations. So let's not put pressure on our lives and our situations just because we are so concerned and we are focusing on what other people are doing. Another thing is marriage. I think it's such, I can't even call it silent anymore, because people just up and say it. It's a pressure on women, especially when we reach a certain age. And if you've been in a relationship for some time, we get asked these types of questions like, oh, wait, when is the wedding coming, or when are the children coming? And it's a really touchy thing. In fact, before I go ahead, I just want to urge us to be more sensitive when we ask people these types of questions, because there's so much behind it. It's not just about, you know, there's so much that we don't see. So let's be more sensitive before we ask people things like, when are you gonna get married, or when are you gonna have a baby, or when are you gonna, oh, you're still at that job, or you're still, you know, let's be more sensitive about these things, because we don't know what people are struggling with behind closed doors. So yeah, back to this whole marriage goals, you know, we need to be careful not to measure our, just because our peers are doing it, or it's what's going on now. You know, you can maybe be even engaged, and then you see people having the wedding of the year, and people are having, you know, these extravagant things, and then now you're putting pressure on your relationship to attain those same things, but you don't know the financial background there. You don't know what's going on behind closed doors. Or we even forget, you know, that it's more than just the ring. It's more than the dress and the suit and the pictures. It's more than just all of that beautiful stuff. There's still a whole relationship behind it. Is the relationship healthy? Is the relationship, you know, we really need to be careful not to measure things like that, because each and everyone's relationship is different. People have different dynamics, you know. We are not all in the same group. We are not all in the same, we deal with things very different. What works for one relationship doesn't necessarily work for the other relationship. We need to be very careful and not jump into serious things like marriage because we want to keep up with the Joneses, or because we think marriage is an achievement. Personally, I don't think it's an achievement. If you want to and that's for you, then it's okay. You know, I'm married. I think it's a beautiful thing, but I don't think that it should be something society uses to pressure people into getting things. Society pressures us into getting into. I think that we can still have accomplished lives without necessarily getting married. That's why I'm saying we have to be careful to not compare and see what it is that validates us, and make sure that we seek those things from the right sources, you know. And remembering that marriage is not just about looking good and pictures and saying I'm married and all those things. It's also about a covenant with God, most importantly, because you're not just vowing to each other, you're vowing to God as well. The other thing I want to talk about is business goals, financial goals, career goals, and all of that stuff. I think that oftentimes we see people enjoying the fruits of their labor, and then we want to compare our situations to them. You know, we just started our business with 6 month, 1 year business, and then we start comparing our our businesses to someone who's been on the journey for maybe 5-10 years. And then we see people buying cars and buying property, and we want to say, oh, why can't I also reach that point? But you don't know how many rejections, sacrifices, or risks that person had to take for them to finally get to that place where they can enjoy, you know, and enjoy the fruits of their labor. We need to be very careful in that sense. And then, because when we start to compare our situations to such things, you end up even feeling, oh, what's the point? Why am I not getting to that point? And then you end up demoralizing yourself, or even career paths and all those things. And you see, that's the thing about comparing. We start developing jealousy and envy. Now we start talking about people and saying, oh, how did they even get that tender? Or how did they even get that car? Is it really done the right way? Or how does she have that job at that young age? It's a very dangerous thing that we if we are not careful, that we can develop those negative feelings within ourselves. Yeah, and also the other thing I want to talk about is body goals, beauty goals, and all of that stuff. Before I get into it, I know it's a bit of a cliche for me to say, but I truly believe we are all beautiful in our own ways. We are all unique. I think that beauty is such a subjective thing. Beauty to one person might not be beauty to someone else. So we can't, I think it's a very subjective thing. So we can't measure our beauty according to what we see on social media, or according to what we see other people doing. I just think of, you know, how we look at people and we're like, wow, this person is so beautiful. But think about when you post a selfie, right? on Instagram, that is, or Facebook. How many selfies do we actually take? I would take like 20 different selfies, and I'm like, yes, take, looking, but then when I post, I only post that one picture. Think about it. And on top of that one picture, I had to look for the right lighting, and then I still added on a filter. So think about it. You are at home in your natural self, and you're comparing yourself to someone who's put all that effort in that one picture. And that's the thing about comparison, right? We are comparing our entire lives to a glimpse of someone's reality, to a highlight in someone's life. And that's the sad thing about social media. If we're not careful, we end up forgetting that there's a backstory to everything. Or even just things like genetics. We are so unrealistically looking at other people. But the thing, I think I had to accept that, you know what? Not all of us will have flat tummies. Not all of us will be slender. Not all of us will be this and that, curvy and so on. Accepting that those are just the genetics we've been given, and appreciate what we've been given. So we can't want something that we can't have, accept what you have and be okay in knowing. Or people have been on their health journeys for so long. So now I would find myself, I'm eating chips on my couch, and I'm like, oh, look at this person, their body is so good, but maybe that person doesn't eat chips like me. We need to be realistic and think of the backstory. Maybe the people go to the gym every day. Maybe they don't eat sugar. They don't do all this unhealthy stuff. So before we compare and make ourselves feel bad for what we are seeing in other people's lives, remember there's a backstory to everything. That's all I'm trying to emphasize. We have to remember that we are comparing our entire lives to a snippet of someone's reality. That's just a highlight, that's really just a highlight. I mean, we all want to put our best foot forward. We are never going to advertise the negative to the public. I can't see myself coming on here and recording myself having an argument with my husband, or but that doesn't mean we don't argue. I'm not going to come here and post all of that, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. I might post us when we are happy and smiling and lovey-dovey, but that doesn't mean that we don't have disagreements, But that's what I'm saying. You can't just look at someone and say, wow, couple goals or whatever it is. You don't know what goes on behind the scenes. Just be in your situation and be okay and work on your situation. Or even just beauty goals. People, like I said, there's so much effort that goes. I'm never going to post a picture when I just wake up first thing in the morning. I'm going to post a picture when I'm put together, So let's be careful. No one is perfect, guys. Everyone has flaws. Everyone has imperfections. But we never advertise those imperfections. Remember that whenever you look at someone else and wish that you had that, Remember that comparison is a thief of joy. I know we've all heard that saying, but it's really true. When we are busy comparing ourselves to other people, we end up forgetting that we are blessed within our own realities, because we are so focused on looking at other people's lives that you don't even pay attention to what you should be doing or what you should be improving in your life. Instead, you become bitter. That's the thing about comparison. You start to develop very dark feelings of jealousy, envy, bitter, resentment. You feel unfulfilled. It creates insecurity. That's why we need to be very careful what we consume, what we allow to consume us. The thing is, we all have different lives, we all have different roots, we've all been handed very different realities. So you can't expect your life to go exactly like someone else's life. It just won't work. The measure is just not there. And also, that concept that we get from jealousy and envy, I feel that is something we really need to work on as people, because I truly believe if we really dig deep and have these real conversations, you'll notice that what is abundant in your life could be lacking in the same person that you're jealous or envious of. What you have plenty of here, the other person doesn't have any of that, So I think that we all have things that we don't have and things that we have. No one has everything figured out. No one has everything in order. So be careful in that sense. Be appreciative of what you have, because it could easily be taken tomorrow. I just want to go back to us being sensitive in how we talk to people and how we present ourselves, putting pressure on people. And sometimes we don't even realize we're putting pressure on people by asking those questions like, oh, I thought you said you were going to be where by now, or what happened to that business? And there's nothing wrong with asking, but we need to be careful and sensitive in how we ask. Or, oh, when are you guys getting married? Oh, you guys have been married for a year now. When are the babies coming? Or when is this happening? And we need to be very, very sensitive and careful how we talk to people, because we end up bringing up those issues and those insecurities, and it's not a good thing to do to each other. And sometimes I realize that we do it without knowing, because it's also been done to us. But we need to be more conscious, because when we know better, we do better, right? And also in the same light, we need to be careful that we don't boast. We don't use social media and how we represent ourselves to people as a way to boast, so that we make ourselves feel better and validate ourselves. Because when you are boasting, in fact, being boastful is a sin. Because when you're doing that, it means you're trying to demean other people to make yourself feel superior, you know. So if you're doing things to make yourself seek validation, or to make yourself feel better by making yourself look like you have the perfect picture, then there's a problem there, and maybe that's a different void that you need to work on. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with posting. In fact, I love social media. I like seeing what people are getting up to. I like during the lockdown, people are sharing recipes and all of that stuff. It's nice to see when people are graduating and all of these type of things. It's nice, but at the end of the day, what I'm just trying to say is we need to be careful that we don't seek too much the validation, so that other people see us and then we feel better about ourselves. Because people, you know, social media and things like that, it's so unpredictable. You know, trends change. What is in fashion today might not be in fashion tomorrow. So today you'll get 5 likes, tomorrow you might get 100 likes. So on the days that you get 5 likes, does that mean that you're less of a person? You know, we need to be very, very careful. So yeah, to summarize, all I'm trying to say is, actually, before I get into that, I just remembered something about compromising ourselves. When we seek validation so much from the world, we can end up compromising ourselves. I remember I spoke about this in my first video, but all I'm trying to say is, you know, when you're so focused on how you're perceived in the world, you can compromise your values, you can compromise who you are as a person. And the reason I wanted to bring it up is because I think it's such a sad reality that I see now. People end up living beyond their means just to keep up with the Joneses, because they want to have that car and they want to be considered as the one that drives that car, or the one that lives in that area, or, you know, the one that always looks a certain way with those luxurious clothes. And we need to be very careful, because we can end up doing things we are not supposed to, just so that we look a certain way and just so that we are accepted in life. And that's why I'm saying peer pressure is still a big thing as adults, guys, because that is a form of peer pressure, when you're doing things just so that you can be considered cool or acceptable. Let's be really careful in that sense. But yeah, now I'm really going to summarize. All I'm trying to say is, let us accept the realities we've been given. We all have different opportunities and different routes, and that's okay. It's okay. Let us appreciate what we have and focus on our own lives instead of focusing on other people's lives, because people are doing their thing. Everyone is doing their thing. Appreciate what you have, because when you focus too much on what other people have, you start to see what is missing in your situation, and you dismiss the blessings God has already given you. And when you're busy saying things like, oh, I wish I looked like that, or I wish I had that, are we saying we are not happy with what God has given us so far? We need to be very careful in those situations, and be careful what we put into our minds. Going to my third point, let's be careful what we give attention to. I'm a very firm believer that we shape our minds. You can really condition your mind to think a certain way. So if you expose yourself too much to negative things, you start to think, and you think that that's the normal way to think, right? I think that thoughts shape the mind. You need to guard your heart and guard your mind. Guard your heart and guard your mind, because you start to think in that way. In fact, I was watching a sermon last week by Pastor Stephen Furtick, and he was talking about before it became a feeling, it was a thought, right? So before you started feeling inadequate or insecure or unsuccessful or like a failure, it was a thought, because you're looking at other people's situations, and then you're looking at them and thinking, oh, look at them, and they've done this and I haven't done that, and what. And the more you stay in that space, then you start to feel those things, and you start to self-criticize, and it's a very dangerous thing, you know. We all have different roots, honestly, and we need to be okay with that. I even remember, you know, when we look at people's situations and we forget that people have different situations for a reason, and they have different backstories. We neglect what we have. I even remember when I started this YouTube channel, and I was like, oh, you know, I don't have this and I don't have this. Maybe I need to develop this and develop that. But then you can't compare your day one project to someone's 3-year project. It just doesn't work like that. You just have to remain consistent in what you're doing. And that's going to my next point. If you can change it, change it. You know, accept what you can't, but if you can, change. So instead of just looking at people and saying body goals and whatnot, if you're really unhappy with how you look, maybe start exercising, or maybe stop eating too much sugar or carbs. Don't starve yourself, but I'm just saying, maybe let's try and live a healthier lifestyle if we're really unhappy. Or if we see people enhancing in their businesses, maybe let's ask, instead of looking at people and now talking about them negatively and saying, oh, how did they even reach that point, and how did they, you know what I mean? Let's actually try and change it if we can, instead of comparing and using that comparison to develop those negative feelings, like I said. And finally, let's be careful where we find our value. You know, I think that we shouldn't measure our success based on what people are doing. In fact, who measures success? I find value, I feel that true value comes from God. True success for me, subjectively, I feel that when I'm happy, then it means I'm successful. When I'm fulfilled, and the people around me are happy and I'm a good person, that means that I've achieved a success, because material things come and go, trends come and go, and we need to be careful. And I just want to leave you with this. Just because people achieve certain things before we do, or in a shorter time span, that doesn't mean that your successes or your achievements are any less significant. We all have different routes to take. But yeah, that's the end of today's video. Until then, please stay blessed and stay safe. Please comment down below. I read all the comments. I appreciate. I really can't cover all the things in this video, but I'd like to hear what are some of the things that you struggle in terms of comparison, in terms of looking at other people and thinking that your life is maybe not up to standard. You know, we've all faced them, you know, so please comment down below. I want to hear. This is a community. We learn from each other. In addition to that, please like, subscribe. Thank you so much for all the subscriptions I've got so far. And hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any episode. Until then, stay blessed.